fractions. So we clear fractions by multiplying by the least common denominator. And we're going to make sure we multiply each term on both sides. So let's look at some examples. Example 1. The temperature in a town is 75 degrees and it's rising 5/6 of a degree every half hour. In another town far away, the temperature is 81 degrees and falling 2/3 Fahrenheit every half hour. In how many hours will the temperature be equal? So let's set up our problem. So we need to have the temperature of one town on one side. So we have 75 degrees and it's rising, so that means increasing by 5/6 every half hour. So let's go ahead and write that out. We have 75 plus 5/6 every half hour. So we could just need a variable, which we'll just put as h. So, right, if we have 2 half hours or 3 half hours, this will increase the 75 degrees to a warmer temperature. Now, we have another town far away. The temperature is 81 degrees and it's falling 2/3 of a degree every half hour. So let's write that out. So we have 81. So falling means negative. So negative or subtracting 2/3 h. So now we've set up our problem. So we want to know what h will be when the temperatures will be equal. So there's some number that will make these two towns to have the same temperature. So let's find it. So if we're going to solve by using the least common denominator, our least common denominator between the two fractions here and here is going to be 6. So we're going to have to multiply each number. Actually, let me put this in 6 by 6. So we'll put a 6 here, 6 here, and then a 6 here. So let's look at this. So when we multiply 6 by each term, when we look at the fractions, this is just going to become a 1, because 6 divided by 6 is just 1. Now we have 6, and this 3, so this will become a 1. 6 divided by 3 is then 2. So we just kind of reduce this. And so now we don't have any fractions in this equation. So let's get a calculator out for the remaining parts of this. So we need to multiply 6 times 75, which would equal to be 450. Then we have 1 times 5, so that's just 5. And then h. Now we have 81 times 6. So let's look at that. 81 times 6, and we're equal to 486. Now we have minus 2 times 2, which that's 4, and that's h, 4h. So now we have our problem set up with no fractions, and now we can just solve like we've done before. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to bring over this negative 4h to the left-hand side. So we'll just add 4h on both sides because we do the opposite. So we add 4h on the left-hand side, because whatever we do to one side, we do to the other. This becomes 0. Let's just go ahead and bring down the equal sign, and this 486. Now let's move to the left-hand side. 5h plus 4h is 9h. Then we're just going to go ahead and bring down this 450. And this is 450 plus 9h. Now, the next step will be is to get 9h by itself on one side. So we're going to go ahead and subtract this 450 on both sides. So this becomes 0, because we do the opposite, and whatever we do to one, we do to the other. So now we have 486 minus 450, and we get 36. And then we go ahead and bring down the 9h. Now, we just go ahead and divide by 9 on both sides, because this is multiplication. So to undo multiplication, we just divide. Then this, right, becomes 1. 36 divided by 9 is equal to 4. Now, let's go back to our problem. Is this hours or is this half hours? Well, we actually solved for half hours. And let's go back to our problem. Is this what we're looking for? It's actually asking how many hours will the temperature be equal. So in order to go from half hours to hours, we just divide it by 2. So our actual answer is 2 hours. So this would be the solution to this problem. So now let's look at another problem. Example 2. The temperature in a town is 57 degrees and falling half a degree every hour. In another town far away, the temperature is 52 degrees and rising a third every hour. And how many hours will the temperature be equal? So once again, we're studying for a problem. So let's look at the first town. So it's 57 and it's falling. So we're going to be subtracting this negative 1/2 every hour. So we write that out as 57. Now falling, so subtracting 1/2 h. Now remember, the variable could be x, y, it doesn't matter. We just picked h just to represent the hour. Now we're going to have another town where it's 52 and it's rising a third of a degree, so 1/3 h. So we're looking at when will these two towns be equal? So what will h have to be in order for this to be actually equal? So let's set it all up then. So we need to look for the least common denominator, which will be between, we have 1/3 and 1/2, so that will be 6. So that means we're going to multiply every term by 6. So let's write 6 and then 6 here. Now, let's look at only the fractions with the 6. So we have 1/2 times 6. Well, 6 divided by 2 then is 3. This just becomes 1. Now 6 divided by 3 is 2. So this just becomes 1. Now, let's go ahead and now continue on with the multiplication. We have to go 6 times 57. 6 times 57, which is equal to 342. Then we have minus 3 times 1, which is just 3. Then h equals, now 52 times 6, which is 312. And then we have plus 2 times this 1 right here, so that's just 2h. Then we're going to have to get the h's to one side, so let's go ahead and add the 3h to both sides. Now we added because this is subtracting 3h, so we do the opposite, so we add and we do to both sides. This just becomes 0. Then on the 2h plus 3h is then 5h. Then let's just go ahead and bring down the other numbers. Now we want this 5h by itself. So in order to do that, we're going to go ahead and just subtract 312 to both sides. This will become 0. So we have 342 minus 312. 2 minus 2 is 0. 4 minus 1 is 3. 3 minus 3 is 0. And then on this side we have 5h. Now I just did this by subtracting it without the calculator because it was pretty easy as it had the 12 and this 42. So you can always get the calculator out as well. Now the next step is to divide this 5h by 5 because we want the h all by itself. So we have to do it to both sides. So 5 divided by 5 is just then 1. 30 divided by 5 is then 6. So So we have h is equal to 6, and this would be hours, because in this problem, remember, in this one, we have every hour, and we want to know in how many hours. So we don't have half hours, we don't have to divide it by 2. So this is just our answer, and we can leave it as is. Now, let's do one more example. Example 3. We have 3/4 x minus 1/2 is equal to 5/6. So all we're doing is looking for what does the value of x have to be. So it's similar to the last problem, except we just don't have a story to go behind it. So we're just looking for what x is with these numbers. So we're going to do the same thing, multiply it by the least common denominator for each term. So that way we can get rid of the fractions, and it makes it a little bit easier to solve. So between 4, 2, and 6, well, we can't do 6 because 4 can't go into 6. So our least common denominator is actually going to be 12. Now, if you kind of forgotten how to do the least common denominator, you can do multiples and see which one would be, what's the common between all 3 of them. And you can always look back at a different problem to look for least common denominator if you kind of need to test off those skills. So now let's go ahead and multiply each term then by 12. So we have 12 here, 12 here, and 12 here. So let's go then and start solving. So we have 12 divided by 4. So this will become a 1. This will become a 3. 12 divided by 2 then is just 1. And 6, because 12 divided by 2 is 6. And then we have 12 divided by 6, which is just then 2. And the bottom becomes a 1. So now we can go ahead and start solving. So we have 3 times this 3, so that would be 9x. Then we have minus, don't forget the minus sign. We have minus 1 times 6, so that's 6, equals 5 times 2, which is then 10. So what's our next step that we have to do? Well, we go ahead and just get x by itself on one side. So we start by adding. So we have the 6 on both sides, because we do the opposite. This just becomes 0. Then we have 9x is equal to 10 plus 6, which is 16. Then we need to get this 9 to the other side, because we want x all by itself. So we're going to go ahead and just divide by 9 on both sides. This becomes 1. And then x is equal to 16 over 9. And then we can just leave it as this improper fraction.